Who gon' take it there? 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 Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
All right, so Kat Abughazaleh, the congressional candidate from Illinois, progressive congressional candidate who's running on Medicare for All, as well as other progressive platforms, against the mayor. I believe his name is Biss, and she has been in the news a few times because she got thrown around by an ICE agent at a protest, as well as consistently having been at these protests that they're having at a Broadview facility in Illinois near Chicago. And this incident where she was thrown on the ground by an ICE agent outside of this Broadview facility has led to an indictment of her and 6 other people for impeding an immigration and customs enforcement operation. So she's been indicted. She's put out a couple statements about it and been on the news already. She's pretty news friendly, this one. The news programs like her, and she's got a contentious race happening in Illinois, so she's not as precipitous in her rise as Zohran Mamdani, at least in the polls. But I imagine things like this are only going to help her, as well as posing a serious risk to her freedom, and certainly going to be a financial burden on her and her campaign. So this is the statement that she put out about it on her YouTube channel.
My name is Kat Abughazaleh. I'm running for Congress in the 9th District of Illinois. The Department of Justice is charging 6 people, including myself, with federal crimes for exercising our First Amendment rights near ICE's Broadview Processing Center. This is a political prosecution and a gross attempt to silence dissent, a right protected under the First Amendment. This case is a major push by the Trump administration to criminalize protest and punish anyone who speaks out against them. That's why I'm going to fight these unjust charges, but I need your help to do it. As I and others have exercised our First Amendment rights, ICE has hit, dragged, thrown, shot with pepper balls, and tear gassed hundreds of protesters, simply because we had the gall to say that masked men coming into our communities, abducting our neighbors, and terrorizing us cannot be our new normal. And because Chicago doesn't back down from bullies in masks who tear gas our neighborhoods, this administration has resorted to weaponizing the federal justice system to scare us into silence. But we're not going to be silent. The Trump administration wants you to be afraid of speaking out against it and its anti-democratic power grabs. And there are plenty of reasons to be afraid right now, but we have to overcome that fear. This case targets our rights to protest, speak freely, and associate with anyone who disagrees with the government. And while we have seen the unhinged and unlawful tactics this administration has used against the American public, it's important to remember they're doing this because they are scared. They are wrong. And they know they are on the wrong side of history. We cannot diminish ourselves in the face of these attacks. That's why we have to unite and stand up for humanity, our rights, and everyone terrorized by Trump's lawless secret police. You'll be hearing regular updates directly from me about this case and how we can use our constitutional rights to resist authoritarianism. And as scary as all of this is, I have spent my career fighting America's backslide into fascism. I'm not going to stop now. And I hope you won't either.
All right, so good call to action from her there. I imagine this is very nerve-wracking for her, and it's, probably a roller coaster of emotions because on one hand, it's serious. Getting indicted by the federal government is not a joke for impeding a law officer or whatever. I imagine it's unnerving. Certainly under Trump, it seems to me that a lot of these cases that he's pursuing on grounds of free speech, protesters and stuff, are going to fall apart, probably get dismissed at some point, and the administration won't continue pursuing it. But in any of these cases where they can get some momentum behind a case, where it seems like they have something, or they're going in front of judges that are interested in locking people like these protesters up, they'll probably do it. And like I said, they have 6 other co-conspirators supposedly in this indictment. There's 2 phrases that the indictment uses a lot. It says conspiracy. It's trying to say that these 6 people conspired to hinder and impede the ICE agent, and paints the picture of the car driving, trying to get out of the driveway. The protesters are impeding it, banging on the just by banging on the hood. And also I think somebody etched pig into to it or something like that. These are the allegations. And it seems to me that, they're on video technically impeding the vehicle. So that seems pretty cut and dry. I'm not sure exactly what the precedent is for coming down on a crime like that. It seems like a pretty thin basis for a federal crime, especially considering you're talking about protests, which could be considered protected speech. But the part that I think is definitely going to fall apart is the conspiracy part. And that is where it seems to me that they're going to consistently overreach when it comes to trying to prosecute people over being Antifa or whatever, is they're going to try to create a conspiracy where there is none. And they might have some success in the cases that there are organized efforts of some kind, but for the most part, that's not what you see when it comes to these things. And certainly this was just an on-the-ground protest where the protesters were doing what they could to try to obstruct the activities of ICE. And that's where I think that there genuinely could be some exposure there in terms of the law. There's also a case to be made that Kat Abughazaleh was assaulted by this officer in a way that violates her free speech and her rights. So probably she should countersue if she can, although that gets tricky fast, and whether or not you're going to be able to outspend the federal government when it comes to court cases is dubious. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to say this is a righteous law officer doing his job, and these people are impeding law enforcement. So it seems to me that there needs to be also cases on the record saying that these law enforcement officers are violating people's rights in the first place. Before you even get to the protesters, they're violating people's rights, which justifies their being out there in the first place, these protesters. So I don't know, that's just how it seems to me. And then in another clip here, Kat Abughazaleh goes on Chris Hayes and talks about this indictment, but also talks about the reason that they're out there protesting. So I wanted to play that real quick.
What we have seen at Broadview against protesters is horrible. We've been punched, dragged, thrown, shot with pepper balls, tear gassed, rubber bullets from snipers on roofs going into local businesses' windows, and that's all on camera, in public. The reason we are protesting, the reason I was protesting, the reason that I have been federally indicted is because what is going on behind the closed doors of that center is immeasurably worse than what we are dealing with on camera. And that's not fun. Don't get me wrong, being thrown to the ground hurts. But our latest eyewitness description of what's happening in the Broadview Processing Center talks about people coming out in stretchers, going into cardiac arrest, being denied water. We've known before that they are denied beds, that pregnant women and grandmothers are sleeping on concrete floors, that dozens of men are in a single cell, held for days or weeks at a time without hot meals or access to hygienic facilities. And so what I really want to stress is the reason we are out there protesting in the first place, the reason that ICE continually abuses people, and the reason that there are people to abuse because they are standing up, is because the most vulnerable communities in Chicago are being terrorized by ICE, and ICE is committing crimes against humanity.
Yeah, so great to bring the focus back to what's going on inside the facility, because that is important for people to remember when it comes to this, especially with the way that the news cycle works when it comes to these type of stories. They're going to make it about this confrontation outside, and the protesters were doing this and that, and so that justifies the indictment, and there's not going to be much talk about what's actually happening to people inside. Abughazaleh says people are being taken out in stretchers, and who knows what kind of deprivation they're facing in there, especially with the government shutdown. These are some of the first people that are going to be deprived of resources, and remember, these are federal facilities. So this type of confrontation, what's happening in Portland, Chicago, and now in New York, is going to be the front lines of what the sort of fight against fascism looks like in America, because you have these people that are showing up to these facilities that are being used to house and deport people without due process, that are dragged off the streets, in some cases citizens, in most cases people with no criminal records at all. And so the people who are showing up to protest that, as any American should, are the first who are being targeted by the state with these type of terrorism charges. And then based on the NSPM 7 directive that was issued by Trump, they're going to start trying to tie together incidents like this with whatever larger organizations they can to try to create the grounds to go after these organizations for seditious conspiracy. And they're going to use events like what happened on the ground at this facility, and again, what's happening in Portland. These things are starting to escalate and happen every day. And more indictments like this are going to start piling up, whether they go somewhere or not. And the case has to be made and people have to be reminded that what we're talking about is the conduct of the administration in the first place. They're not out there protesting for no reason. And they're not out there protesting because Fox News would have you believe that it's because they want open borders. It has nothing to do with that. It's the humanitarian crisis that America is plunging itself into. And the way I see it, America is plunging itself into crises of all kinds in just about every way that it can, because this government shutdown, I think, it's starting to become clear how the effects of that are being laid bare. The Trump administration is trying to use it as deliberately as possible to choke funding to certain programs like SNAP, even though they don't really have to. There's a federal government workaround so that that doesn't happen, but the Trump administration wants to cut SNAP. So that's going to cut people off of their benefits in red and blue states in every state in the country. And every state is now scrambling to figure out how they're going to feed people during this crisis. On the 1st, I believe, is when these SNAP benefits are overturned. And it's going to, I think, radically change the political dynamic of the country. And while the front lines of this sort of fight against fascism is these people deliberately protesting these immigration centers, trying to send the signal to feds that they cannot just disappear whoever they want off the streets and create resistance to those operations. But then I think that's going to expand to a larger issue of people who aren't being fed, and they're going to need direction in terms of where to go and to direct that anger at. And it could turn explosive very quickly. Whether that leads Trump to calling martial law, escalates to that point or not, I have no idea. But what I do know is that the Trump administration seems kind of pathologically committed to escalating the situation as quickly as they can. And I don't think that that's necessarily going to work in their favor. I mean, think about it. If the Project 2025 plan is to kind of institute federal government control over the elections by the time the midterms and then the next presidential election happens, and to choke all of these different programs, defund them, and generally create conditions of consolidated power under the federal government, under a conservative administration. Why would you create the most explosive conditions for opposition to your administration during the part where you're still consolidating power and you're still attempting to get control over the election system, which they are in fact doing? That consolidation is happening, and they are making moves to try to control how the next set of federal elections might go in this country. It's not the easiest thing for them to do because it's distributed throughout the country, but they're doing what they can, and they're starting now. So it seems to me that the best way, if that's really your goal, is to not plunge the country into chaotic conditions. Last time that happened under COVID, that led to some of the most profound protests that the country has seen in decades, just as a function of the fact that when enormous amounts of people are out of work or don't have anything to eat, those are the kind of conditions where people riot. Generally, people are pretty docile in America, and that's because things have been pretty much going along as normal. So while Trump may view it as sort of political retribution to cut SNAP benefits and that sort of thing, he's actually, I think, creating the most ideal conditions for resisting his administration, because you're going to have a maximum amount of people that are mad. And a lot of the poor people that voted for Trump, whether they're on SNAP or not, they're going to be affected by this. And it kind of accesses the sort of base part of people's minds that just understands that the person in power is screwing them over. And Trump is just handing them the perfect conditions to say that to themselves, I think, way too early. Because if people start realizing that after you've consolidated power in the military and there's nothing people can do, there's no room for resistance, then that's where you can fully clamp down and create an authoritarian society. It just seems to me that we're not there yet. So creating the conditions for maximal resistance before they have consolidated their fascist army and infrastructure, to me seems like, the best way to make their own plan fail. But it's only going to be as a function of candidates like this, Abughazaleh, who are setting a good example of resistance. This is not the only type of tactic, and obviously she has to show some restraint. She's a public figure. But for people to see images of resistance and see somebody who is, running on a campaign that contradicts the kind of stuffy politics of the Democratic Party, and is in favor of something, more progressive, more populist, more anti-Zionist. That's where the country's going. And it's not just a matter of the unrest that happens creating the conditions where the current administration can be rebuked, but there also have to be people offering a different way forward. And I'm not saying Kat Abughazaleh is the one who has all the answers, nor Zoran. It might be nobody that we've seen so far. It might be very well outside of the Democratic Party. Who knows? But chances are good that some of the figures we're starting to see on the public stage now are going to be the ones at the forefront when people start asking for answers and looking for solutions outside of the Trump administration. And the faster Trump can tank his own experiment of whether or not he can run America, the sooner people are going to start looking for those alternatives, and we have to be ready to give that to them. Pressure getting pressed, do you feel it now? What even happens next, I don't really know. Voice carries less, can you hear me now? Soon as I get blessed, time's running out. Pressure getting pressed. Pressure getting pressed. Feel the pressure getting pressed. Yeah. Pressure, do you feel it now? I'm just saying this.